is really windy out here today, so hopefully that doesn't affect the sound too much. Another reason why I need to try and get to the point of investing in a lavalier mic, but we'll get there eventually. The weather has been really bad for the past few days. It's very windy, wet, just dreary. It's very glary out here today. And so I just haven't got much done. I haven't got much done in the kitchen because our kitchen's outside and motivation has been low. So I'm going to bring you along today on a few tasks that I've got to get done. I've got some cooking to get done, but I also have some stuff in the garden in between rain to get done. So I'm going to plant out some more raspberries. So we have a raspberry bed here. Let me turn you around and I will show you. Now we have a raspberry bed here that we mounded up. We made it quite deep for a perennial sort of a raspberry bed, and we planted, I think it was, I want to say 10 raspberry canes in here, bare root ones, and none of them did anything. They all just, they didn't take, they didn't root, I don't know, they didn't do anything. So I bought some more. I managed to get 3 from Dailies, which are these 3 here that I just planted out the other day, and I managed to get 3 from Green Patch Seeds. These are a lot smaller, but they look quite good. So I'm going to get these 3 in as well along this bed, and then hopefully that will fill this bed up eventually. I do have a little bit of powdered fertilizer here to add. It's just a bit of powdered sea mungus, seaweed pellets, and some blood and bones, some fish bone meal. So I'm just going to put a scoop of that in each hole as well. The strawberry bed is really enjoying the slightly cooler weather. You got one here that is just about ready to be picked, and plenty more flowers setting more fruit around. So that's nice. I've got lots of suckers here that I'm going to have to probably relocate because some of them are traveling way out of the beds. So I'd like to start a second row of them, I think. So I'll probably look at collecting up the suckers and transplanting them elsewhere into a second row of strawberries. We did have some that died off in this end here, so there's probably more that I can transplant up that section as well, but this row is looking really, really good. For breakfast today, or well, it was sort of like, I don't know, 10 or 11 o'clock by the time I got around to it, we made more Dutch Baby Pancakes. So I made these the other day and the kids really enjoyed them. So I made them again because we have plenty of eggs at the moment. I do about 125 grams of flour to 200 grams of coconut cream and 6 eggs with a tablespoon of sugar in there, which seems to work out well for us. They're still fairly dense, but they're real custardy, and we really like that. I'd imagine they'd be a little bit puffier if you used coconut milk or a dairy milk rather than the coconut cream, but we enjoy the texture anyway. and just make sure it whisks up really well. So simple ingredients, and then whisk it and whisk it and whisk it until you get all the lumps out, and it's nice and a really emulsified batter that's ready to go. One of the things with Dutch Baby Pancakes that you need to do is you need to preheat your pan. So you put some ghee or some butter or fat of choice in the bottom of your pan, and you stick it in the oven to preheat. And you want it to be nice and hot by the time you're pouring the batter in. So you put it in the oven, pull it back out once it's melted, and then you pour your batter into that hot fat. You want to be careful, obviously, because it's hot fat, but you want to pour it into the middle of the fat so that it's greasing the tray as you're pouring it, because if you hit the batter too hard of the pan that doesn't have fat in it, then it's going to stick. So just be aware of that. And this is what they look like when they're cooked. And I sliced this one up into segments and used some of my berry compote on it. It's just berries that I'd used to make cordial, mixed with a little bit of fresh frozen berries and some maple, and warmed up till it's sort of like a berry sauce. I just realised the mic was facing the wrong way when I was talking before, so I may have to repeat that, so I'm going to do that. Again, another vote for a lovelier mic. Anyway, tomatoes are out. Tomatoes have finished fruiting. There's some over there that are fruiting just a last flush, which I'm leaving alone. Don't want to move the trellises in between growing because it's just too much hassle. So I'm planting things at the base of the trellises that either require trellising. So the far row has this row over here. I've got peas all the way down. And then what I'm planting at the moment is beetroot. So beetroot doesn't require row covers. The pests seem to leave it alone, so that's fine. I'll plant along here. That's the problem with leaving the trellises in, is you can't put a row cover over the row because the trellis is in the way. So things like turnips and all my brassicas and things like that have to go in different beds because they have to be able to have a row cover over them, otherwise they just get decimated by pests. So putting beetroot in here. Now, beetroot seeds are really tiny. Let me bring you down. And each seed has the potential to have multiple plants in it. So I normally plant them in twos, and then if you get 2 to 4 little bulbs, then that's fine. You can harvest them one at a time or all together. It's up to you. It depends on how they grow. But I normally plant them 2 in per spot, about 10-15 centimeters apart. And I'm just going to run a row all the way down this trellis work until I run out of seeds. I'm a bit short on seeds at the moment. I haven't done my seed order because I've just forgotten and gotten a bit slack. So I need to do a seed order. But for the moment, I'm just going to run it all the way down this row here, as far from the end down as I can go. And I've got some of the blood and bone meal and crushed seaweed that I'm going to just sprinkle into the trench as I go along. I let some of my basil here flower and then dry out, and the idea is that I can then harvest some seeds from it. So now that the flowers are all dried out, if I strip the flowers up like that, I end up with all these petals. And if you go through the petals and you sort of scrunch them up and you do that sort of thing, you can find seeds. So there's little tiny basil seed there. So what I do is I just grab whole handfuls of them, stick them in a bowl, and then I just sit there and I sort of scrunch through them until all the flower petals float to the top, seeds drop to the bottom, and you have seeds. Or, because they're nice and dry, realistically, I could just put all these petals into one of my seed jars and just plant these, because if there's seeds in there, they're going to germinate even with the petals on them. So that's an easy way to do it as well, so long as everything is completely dry. And I've let these dry out completely. They will have dropped some seeds into this pot, but that's fine. I'm going to top this pot up and use it for basil again next year as well. So I'm just going to strip off any that are nice and dry and don't look to have any sort of insect life on them. Just like that. Oh look, I caught a spider. Nope, it jumped off. So there is some bug life in them, so I might put them in a bowl on my bench to let any of that vacate the premises for a little while before I put it in a jar. A spider has hatched down here. Let me see if I can focus on it. Don't know if I can get that in focus. I had a handful of seeds. Give me a second. Alright, I had a seed packet that I had just emptied of beetroot seeds, so I've just put the basil seeds in there, and let me see if I can bring you close enough to see all these baby spiders. There we go, I think that's focused on them. So something is hatched there. The stingless bees have created a little bit of a wax cap over the front of their hive, I'm guessing to protect themselves as the weather gets cooler. I don't know if you can see the little heads poking out of there though. Let me take you down lower and I'll see if I can get a better shot. This is the first bed of garlic that I planted. The garlic is sprouting through in spots. I think the guinea fowl are nipping the top of the leaves off, which isn't a huge deal, so for the moment I'm just going to ignore it, but we'll have to see how much they chew at them now that the bed is open for them to get into, and we'll go from there. There's definitely something gnawing at them, and I haven't really found that anything normally gnaws at garlic, so the only thing different is that the guinea fowls are loose in here, though I suppose because it's open maybe it could be cockatoos and I just haven't seen them doing it, but we'll have to wait and see. We also planted out a few more of our trees down this strip here, so this is the chicken pen that's going to be removed, and we're going to put all our berry bushes and stuff in here, but we have a whole row of trees. They go from this side and all the way down this side as well. Oh, rubbish sitting there. That we're going to wood chip all the way through. So all our apples and peaches are down that way, and then these ones that we've done this way, we have 3 feijoas and 2 pears up the end there as well. Chickens always jump up at this spot here when you're walking past, just in case you might have something that they want, and say hello. Hey? All starting to get their feathers back in now, which is nice. This one here is nicknamed Fluffy Cheeks because she's got this gorgeous feather pattern on her face that sticks out. I amended some beds today before the rain came in. We use a product called Active Grow. It's got compost and some blood and bone and some seaweed and a whole bunch of other organic materials in with the soil. It's one of the easiest to obtain bagged soils that we can get around here that are good quality. We are working on making our own compost, but it's going to take us a while to get to any quantity of compost that we could actually have enough to use for ourselves. While I was doing this, we've got this creeping weed that's going across all my garden beds. It looks a little bit like clover. I'm not entirely sure what it is, and it has a really dense blanket-like root structure, so I was pulling that out as I went through, and then I planted a whole bunch of seeds. So in this bed I planted a few different types of cabbage, a red acre, a Chinese cabbage, and a mini ball head I think, and some kale on the end, some red curled kale I think, and some winter kale in the end as well. Darryl came out and he mulched the bed for me. We use baled sugarcane as mulch for our beds here. It's an easy to obtain product from town that we get, and we find that it doesn't go moldy, there's no weed seeds in it and things like that. It works quite well for us, so that's what we stick to. And these bales, I think it's $10 or $12 for a bale, so it's not too expensive either. I filled this first bed up. This bed used to have thyme in it, but the thyme died off. I'm not entirely sure why, but it did. So we topped up this bed. Now, I have problems growing carrots because we don't have very deep beds. So these raised beds are quite good for carrots because they're a lot deeper than our side beds. So I topped the bed up, marked some rows, and then planted carrots in the rows. So I just made a really fine divot as the rows and sprinkled the seeds on there. I'll thin them out later. Now carrots, we have a lot of problems with getting carrots to germinate. They like to stay moist, but they have to stay on the surface of the soil because they're so small. So I didn't really cover them. What I did was I put a really light layer of mulch over the top, and I made sure to just sort of place it. I didn't pat it down, it's not too thick, it's just covering the whole thing. So hopefully it'll rain over the next few days, which will help with those seeds. The bed has sides, so they shouldn't get washed away, and the mulch should help the water there, and they are in just a very slight divot. So hopefully that bed will germinate quite well. I don't grow very many carrots because I can't grow enough for us to eat, not really. So we just grow enough for some fresh eating for the kids to be able to pull and eat when they want to, because they really enjoy doing it. Now the reason I planted the cabbages and kale in this particular bed is because this one was already set up with a row cover. So we used some poles from a pool that we had for the kids a couple of years ago, and then some polypipe to arch over the top of those poles. And then this is just insect netting that we bought on eBay. It's very similar to like curtain material, and I just have it draped over the rows, and I use metal turf pegs on the side just to hold it down and keep that bed covered, because the guinea fowl and that can get into this space at the moment too. Little baby seedlings, if they've got bugs on them and the guinea fowl are trying to get to the bugs, then they have a tendency to pull the whole plant out, so they need to be covered for that purpose. But also white cabbage moth are a big issue for us, so the brassicas definitely need to be covered as often as possible. Did start to rain eventually in the afternoon and got a bit more dreary and a bit cooler and a bit yucky, so I decided that I was going to make soup for dinner. And I made what is a Quirky Cooking recipe for brown rice and chicken soup. It's a creamy brown rice and chicken soup without dairy. So I put, it has all the standard soup bases in it. It's got onions and garlic, carrots and celery. I added some mushrooms. I don't think the recipe calls for mushrooms. And I cut it all up smallish, and then I put it inside in the Thermomix and minced it up into even smaller again, because we like our soups like that. So I minced it all up in the Thermomix, and then I cooked it off in the pan, just like you normally do with soup base. So I cooked off all the vegetables in the bottom of the pan in a bit of ghee, and then added the chicken. So this is a bag of the chicken that I have processed from one of the bags of thighs. So it's 1.5 kilos of thighs that I've deboned, deskinned, and then cut up to use. So I added the chicken and cooked that off. We add stock to it. I used 2 jars of my canned stock and refilled one with water, I think. And then some homemade stock paste. So this is homemade chicken stock paste. It's chicken and vegetables and salt and stuff that's cooked down, stored in the freezer. Then you add brown rice to the soup, and you want to stir it through and get the brown rice through. And then what makes this soup nice and creamy is that you use ground rice and ground almonds. So in the Thermomix I had powdered some of the brown rice and some almonds into a powder, and then I add that to the soup. So I put that in to the soup to create the creaminess, and it breaks down in the soup and makes it, I don't know, creamy, I suppose. So you put that in there. You have to simmer it for about 30 minutes so that it thickens and simmers. When doing it on the stovetop, because this recipe is for a Thermomix, and I don't use anything that uses heating in my Thermomix because we just don't have the power capacity, especially not of an evening, to do that. So you have to stir it fairly continuously, because the ground almonds and the ground rice will stick to the bottom of the pan. So you need to scrape the bottom of the pan as you're cooking it until it gets to a certain point, and then I suppose it dissolves to a degree into the soup, and then it doesn't seem to stick to the bottom anymore. So we just stirred this until It was sorted and it was really nice and thick and creamy, and then just served it with some of the leftover bagels from yesterday that we had for dinner, and a bit of salt on top. So that was dinner, and that was my day. Thank you very much for joining me again, and I will see you again in the next video. See you later.